So Cho, thank you for coming on as a guest. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Marty.
The reason why I wanted to have you on is your experience in artificial intelligence. You gave a presentation here at Iona Workspaces, and I found it very interesting.
Yeah.
AI is a really big topic that a lot of people are interested in and don't know too much about it. I barely started getting involved with ChatGPT, so I'm a very late adopter, I guess you would call it. But what is your experience? How did you get into working with artificial intelligence?
Yes, of course. Happy to elaborate. So I've been working in tech for a long time. I think if you count all those years, maybe it's about almost 3 decades already.
Wow.
So obviously, I didn't start out in artificial intelligence. In the beginning of my career, I was just doing coding, right, at various consulting companies, software companies. And then while I was at graduate school at UCLA, my thesis was actually in this area of artificial intelligence. It was a project that almost felt like a series, but apply in the medical pharmaceutical space. So that's when I started looking into natural language processing, and that's like one of the core areas of AI.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I started. And then along the way in my career, I worked at Fortune 500 big companies, right? And I've taken on managerial positions, leadership positions.
Right.
And then at some point, I was doing a ton of startups. And startups are a lot different. Like you get in and you need to really get your hands dirty, sometimes.
Sure.
And so one of the startups I worked at was called Camino Financial. I was a chief technology officer there for 5 years. And that's the time when I spent a lot of my time building this artificial intelligence framework for the company. And we use it really to empower the business to improve its financial performances. So along the way, I got to learn a lot more about AI. And then the last couple of years, obviously with the rise of ChatGPT, as you mentioned earlier, and a few other really cool modern generative AI technologies, I got to learn even more. This is, again, a different area of AI that is sort of very hot right now. And so that's kind of my my path and background. I hope that kind of explains.
Yeah, for sure. So artificial intelligence seems pretty broad to me. A little bit of it is like a large language model, but what other kind of forms of AI are there? Because when you say you built the AI system framework, what does that mean? Does that mean using a large language model?
Not exactly. So let's take a step back, right? AI has been around. I mean, I think in the 40s, 50s, that's when it kind of really got its first start. But back in the day, things were very, very basic, right? So in this world today, we've got the traditional AI models, right? And then you got the generative or the newer, stronger AI models, right? So those are actually very different. The traditional AI are more geared towards specific problems, right? They're maybe focusing on a very particular domain knowledge, right? And they're trying to solve a particular type of problem, okay? So for instance, like when I was at that fintech company in that startup, the system that we put together basically power the underwriting process for loan applications. And we use a lot of AI for that. So that is a very specific problem we're trying to solve, right? So that has nothing to do with large language model. Back in those days, there was not even LLM. So it was a very kind of specific focus solution, right? And then the generative AI is something more recent. Obviously, I think OpenAI, the company that started ChatGPT, I think they started around 2014 or around there, and that's when they kind of got their first research in those areas, but they didn't even get it right at the very beginning. It wasn't until a couple of years ago, when they had the compute power and everything, all the stars aligned, then large language models start to become, pick
Very
up
wild
steam. Yeah, it's wild.
I mean, I started using ChatGPT recently. We're at 3.5 right now, at least for like the free model.
Sure.
And just interacting with it is mind blowing. Like I'll ask it to say, like write me an email to, an entrepreneur, asking them about this, include this, and it just like, gives you a query, gives you the subject line, and then gives you the body of the email. I'm just like, wow, that's like probably like 85% dead on of what I need, and then I'll just, include the small 15%, but it's more like the nuts and bolts, or like just the chunk of what you need just right now is already in any query for ChatGPT. Exactly. It's mind blowing. So it's cool. But that's more the newer generative AI. Correct. You feel?
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
Large language models.
And the way it's put together is actually very different. Because generative AI is sort of trained to solve generic problems. Versus the traditional AI. It's very specific domain. So that's why, like, when you ask it to do something, write an email for this scenario, whatever, it's always able to respond. This is where traditional AI couldn't do, right? Generative AI can do a lot of that for you as long as you give it the right instruction and context. So, for instance, like the example that you were giving earlier, if you give it a lot more background, like, okay, you're writing a letter to an entrepreneur, this is sort of, he's in this particular industry, and this is kind of the timing. And if you give it more, it will be able to get you closer to 100%. There are a lot of times it's not able to go to 100% because it's lacking context, right? A lot of people don't think they need to give it, but sometimes actually you do. Just like when humans talk, you sometimes do need to provide context and background. Otherwise, nobody knows what he's talking about. And what large language model is trained to do is come up with stuff. So when you don't give it enough stuff, it starts to hallucinate. And that's the problem everybody's having, is that, that 20% isn't quite working. What's going on, right? It's sometimes it's because of that. You don't give it enough direction.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm barely kind of interfacing with it at the moment, so just getting used to it. And the power of ChatGPT is really astounding. So amongst ChatGPT, what are some other AI software and applications that you've experienced and you've used? You talk about using a generated influencer for social media. This was something that was very interesting. And Gary Vaynerchuk, do you know who he is?
No.
Gary Vaynerchuk is basically like a social media business mogul. Is worth like net worth is like 50 million.
Oh yeah, I think I
he's all over.
He's all over the place.
Social media, and he said exactly what you were saying. You're like, this is my influencer. It's completely made up. I took it from took a picture from the internet and then added some AI application to it, and this is what we got, like some beautiful chick. And then he was like, yep, influencers in the future are all going to be generated, like AI generated. Like where did you like come up with that idea? How do you hear about AI? Why did you do that? What was the purpose of generating that person?
Yeah, so this idea of using AI or computer to generate an avatar influencer isn't quite new. I think maybe the idea first came about in the 80s. If you watch some of the Japanese anime, back in those days, there were some anime series or movies that was basically, written to talk about this topic. And it was wild back then, but of course it was a comic. So, it's just a story. But now it's a little bit different. Now, with some of the tools that we have today, like Synthesia, HeyGen, these tools are basically, and Sora from OpenAI, these are basically text-to-video generation platforms. And what you can do with that is by giving it a prompt, it would generate AI avatars, usually it just gives you the avatar and you had to tell you what you wanted. Basically, you still got to give it a story, right? Because that's what people become attracted to. And so when you put story and avatar together, it becomes an influencer.
I see.
And that's what's kind of getting popular these days. So I think some of the companies out there today are using it to really help out with some of the marketing efforts. You know, before
Absolutely.
you have to have a big production almost like this, right? Getting people, you know, in front of the camera with the lightings and everything. And then do the shooting, then you got to edit, then you got to publish. It's a lot of work, right?
Right.
Now the workflow is a lot simpler. And you don't need as many people. You can just tell the computer, say, hey, I need this person to say this, right? And then basically these text to video generation platforms, they can basically manipulate pixels in the video to have the influencer say certain things, right?
Wow.
Everything, you know, matching to the shape of the mouth.
That is wild.
Yeah.
That is wild. So talking about like future implications of AI, I was thinking about how many jobs are going to be replaced from AI just by, you know, so many different applications.
Sure.
But like an influencer is kind of one of them, like a model for, you know, a brand or what have you. You can have an artificial generated person wear your clothing, say something for you, and I was like, man, that's really extraordinary. And to hear Gary Vaynerchuk say that this is kind of going to be the future, it totally makes sense. Working with people, it can be quite difficult, and have everybody just trying to save money and make more money, right? That's kind of the driver.
That's true.
Behind just like the human commerce environment. We're just trying to save money and make more money.
Yeah. So, I mean, my thought on this is, you know, obviously some jobs would be impacted in general with the rise of generative AI. But don't forget, you know, it's always good to have humans in the loop, right? You don't want to be in a situation where everything goes unchecked and then it goes out, you know, to the public, because that could be damaging to one's reputation. So you want to always have that human eye, right, in the process, so that whatever that gets produced, you know, it's checked from top to bottom, right? So there are no unintentional messaging that goes out. And so I say, you know, that is, so I say that the situation is not as disastrous as it sounds. And also I think generative AI can also help with coming up with more jobs, right?
That makes sense.
Yeah, I think as long as people are willing to pick up new skills, learn new things, like for instance, prompt engineering, that is a job in itself. Like that's kind of became popular since last year or the year ago. And
prompt engineering.
Yeah, prompt engineering. Like it takes, it's almost, I would say, like 50% art, 50% science to come up with the right prompt in order to instruct, you know, things like these ChatGPT models or whatever text to video generation models to work properly, right? So that is, you know, and there are jobs out there for that kind of role that goes, you know, I don't know, like 100, 200K a year, something crazy like that. So, so I mean, things are obviously changing all the time. And so I think paying attention to that trend and picking up new skills is always going to be very helpful.
Right. That totally makes sense.
Yeah.
So this is kind of, we talked about a little bit about the current state of AI and a little bit about the future implications. But when you were giving your presentation about the text to video, and you were showing a little bit about this video of a person like kind of walking through a marketplace.
Correct. Yeah.
Is that something that is online that people can see, or is that something that you created yourself?
So that was a demo video from OpenAI, the company that created ChatGPT. So the platform they use to do that is called Sora.
Sora.
S-O-R-A. And I think currently they're still under beta testing. I don't believe it's publicly available to everyone yet. But a lot of people, obviously people with access have done really interesting work. Last night I just read a news about some record label using Sora to create like the very first music video completely with AI. So in that video I saw you got people like on this school bus or whatever, and the people look real, but they're not. But they're doing their thing, singing and whatever, just like a traditional music video. However, everything is done with Sora for that video. So to me that is amazing, because that is changing the value chain in the music industry. Because before you have to hire a whole bunch of crew, you got to get out to hire a real bus, get people to sit inside and have a director, producer, and all that, the whole 9 yards, just to get it going.
Yeah. So I've heard of Tyler Perry, who is a actor and a movie producer himself, spending tons of money to like build a set on his property, like hundreds and hundreds of $1 million, and stopped it in production because he's seen the power of AI, where you're not going to need physical sets anymore. You could have a AI generated bus with a bunch of people in it, doing some wild shit, that is, and you can have them do exactly what you want to do. I would imagine as the technology gets better and better. So it's very surprising to see how quick, if you're not in the AI loop, how things are progressing.
Yeah, it's funny. Like if you look at Sora, it's really a physics simulation lab. If you think about it, right? Because you're telling it you want this video to look like this, but it's able to figure out, okay, this thing should behave just as it would in the real world. So a lot of it has to do with physics, so that's the amazing part of it. But of course, like there are still problems or kinks they're trying to iron out.
Sure.
I've seen example videos where things look a little weird. like there would be, like people are like splashing water instead of going down, it's like floating, stuff like that. But it's always, it's one off. It's just like that 20%, they don't quite have it down yet. So, you still need to kind of go in and fix it. But most of the time, like the demo videos I've seen out there, they're pretty realistic.
Yeah.
And pretty good.
Like you said, probably like 80% accurate of what you need. Yeah. It's cool. It's cool that the application for using AI, there's a lot of possibilities going to open up, especially for an entrepreneur, somebody who is wanting to start a business. Like in my world right now, I have an opportunity to supply cashews from Cambodia, because that's kind of like my background.
I see.
My dad and my grandfather are Cambodian, and supply that to the companies here in the U.S. So using things like Canva, using things like ChatGPT to kind of write emails or come up with ideas. Tell me a little bit more about the text to like picture AI that maybe you created with the what platform do you use for the influencer that you created?
So that particular image that I show in my presentation was created using Google Colab, but we had code that I basically got from somebody online, and I just was tweaking like certain parameters, and then again by providing like the right context and also the right description, I was able to say, okay, draw me a model that looks like this, and it's able to come up fairly quickly if you use the right GPU. So one of the nice thing about Google Colab is it gets a little technical, but the nice thing about it is that you can select how much resources you can get from the cloud, right? So like the better GPU you have, for instance, like the one that I used was NVIDIA's GPU. Like it was able to come up with these images faster, a lot more quickly. But like if you use traditional CPUs, it'll take forever.
Sure.
Yeah. So basically, it was pretty, it was pretty easy. But there are easier tools these days now for everybody. I think there's a few websites, like you can go to again, OpenAI has one called DALL-E. It's a text to image generation. You can just go to the prompt. I believe it's a paid version for the ChatGPT version 4. It's included in there.
Okay.
Yeah, and you can say I want an image of whatever and of this thing, and then give it some description. It will actually generate. But there's a few things out there. There's another one very good. It's called Midjourney.
Oh, I heard this one. Yeah, you were talking about that one too.
Yeah, Midjourney is probably one of the first few that came out, and they've kind of stuck around. Like a lot of people use it to generate high definition images. Some of it, used in marketing material. Some of it used, I don't know, for just art, digital art. But it's just all around very, very powerful.
Yeah. I was watching examples on the Joe Rogan Experience, where his person, like engineer who sets up the sound and the video and everything, was using Midjourney and was putting in the prompt. I think it was text about create an image of a bunny like meditating, or like a spiritual bunny or something, and it kept on getting more and more details, and getting more and more specific, and the images were freaking intense. And this is all built on kind of the way that humans think. So in a way, it only has sort of that framework, right, to go off.
Yeah.
But the reason why I asked for, say, DALL-E or something like that, because as an entrepreneur, if you wanted to create, say, a logo or something like that, do you feel like that is sort of an application to use if you want to say, hey, I'm starting a cashew business, give me a logo with the cashew and, the United States or whatever. Could it do something like that and create an image, create a logo?
So I was in the same position a few years ago when I was trying to come up with a logo for my business. It's a consulting business. So I was trying to use some of those things, but I found that things like DALL-E, Midjourney, like when you ask it to do something very specific, like designing a logo, it sometimes hallucinate more than I like. Okay. And also it sometimes has all these background images or things behind the logos that I don't want, right? Because most of the time what you want is a clean, crisp logo that you can copy and paste and, I don't know, put it on letterhead, on a website, or whatever. But DALL-E doesn't help you in that regard. I think it's more like a great creative canvas, like where you can do stuff or try different things. But when you want a logo, it's better for you to go to websites that are specifically designed to generate logos by AI.
Okay.
And those I find to be more effective.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's because the AI would probably, if you're using Midjourney, like you said, hallucinate too much and add a bunch of context, a bird in the background, or like some colors in the background.
Yeah,
or something.
And then you gotta do another processing to remove the background, and then the image becomes not as great.
Yeah.
But the one that I used was good. Like it give me like 5 different sizes, and you try to imprint on, some stationery and different, background just to see how it would look.
Okay.
So that was, helpful.
Those are probably better. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. So we have another a few minutes left.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, is there anything that you want people to know about AI or like?
Yeah, sure. I think I touched on this a little bit at the presentation. But one of the things I think a lot of people are working on right now, and most people may not be aware, is that the concept of AI agents. I think you would probably see more and more of these things coming around to help us in our day-to-day. So the concept behind AI agents is you tell AI, hey, I need to accomplish this thing, or I need to meet this goal, whatever. And this agent goes about to actually design, plan, and then execute. right? All on its own, pretty much, with very little guidance from a human. So I saw this year, like, there's definitely a couple of things in the marketplace right now, like you can use. There's one called Multi-On, very interesting. Like, it's an agent, but like sits on your browser. So before you have to so for instance, like if you want to order something from DoorDash, you had to click through a bunch of things. But then now you can just say, I would like, a bowl of ramen, from this shop, get it delivered to me by whatever. And then you can see the browser start working on its own, and placing the order. And it knows, because it's kind of recording your history, right? And it knows how you would do it, and it's just kind of executing based on that. And so you probably see some of those applications, doing like mundane, repetitive tasks getting done by AI agent. I find it very useful for even research. Like go and do some research for me. Like go crawl the webs, right? And find me all these information about this topic, and then compile, summarize, give it to me in a very concise 5-page PDF document so I can read when I wake up in the morning. So you probably see some of that happening. I mean, even, and a lot of it, think of it as like, all these robots, they're also kind of happening now. Like, Elon Musk has a company called Grok that I think they're building a robot, and then, I think OpenAI is in it as well. And so it's the same. Like you have this agent or this very generic form. It's able to execute based on some instruction, and the way they execute is, design, plan, and then break down the tasks.
Yeah.
So I think that will be happening more and more. Of course, with some errors, but it's coming, and I think I'm excited about that.
Yeah, it's I feel like it's gonna take a lot of the like you said, the repetitive, mundane tasks that people do on a day-to-day basis. It's really exciting. I'm a little bit optimistic the way that AI is influencing our lives, because it's incredible. So Cho, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and I mean, if I learn more about AI, I'd love to have you on again to just maybe get more.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you.